And we're live. Hopefully my sound is okay to go through Homicide Life on the Street. I just said that twice, folks. So over to Jeff, and I'll put the slides on.
Yeah, I can hear you now. All right, we are up to Season 7, Episode 13, which is called HOMICIDE.com. And it was written by Sarah B. Charno and Ayelet Sela. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that even close to right. And directed by Jay Desson. So I'm going to read a very brief recap and then send it over to Ben for his thoughts. The internet is staged for a ritual murder, which was staged, or was it? The body is found the following morning, and Shepard takes the call, her first as primary since her beating. Since Lewis can't be found, she partners with Bayless. Second shift detectives Bonaventura and Austin catch word of the day shift's case. It seems the victim in Shepard's case was a witness they had interviewed the day before about an online murder hoax. The detectives are informed about another murder that is scheduled for midnight. So it is now a red ball. The detectives try to put the clues together but come up with nothing and must wait until the netcast begins before they can trace the killer. The trace is successful, but when they arrive at the scene, the killer has left them a computer with the words, "Ha ha, fooled you." Barnfather wants Bayless reassigned as the primary if something doesn't turn up soon. Shepard goes online to flesh out the killer. He advertises another murder will take place at inplainsight.com, which turns out to be a website run by Bayless. The webcast begins. The killer's cell phone signal is tracked, and he is apprehended. And I would just note, even though it's not included in this recap, that there's a scene before Shepard does that at the end where Bayless confronts her and kind of talks about briefly, what happened with him in the, as a rookie or whatever. And he's trying to give her a pep talk basically. And she actually, says something to the effect of, you came up under the shadow of the almighty Pimbleton, and I'm not like that. I don't need a mentor, was basically what she said. So I wanted to include that in the recap. But anyway, Ben, what'd you think?
I just wrote down that was a good scene. That the Bayless versus Shepard scene, where he's trying to help her out, and then it becomes a bit confrontational between the two of them. Especially when G later on it develops that G has had some pressure from Barnfather to take her off the case, and I remember early on in season 1, G saying that he didn't want to reassign Bayless from being the lead on the Adina Watson case because it would cut his legs out from under him. So G is always loyal to his detectives. He wants them to have a great clearance rate, number one for him, but he's also loyal to his detectives. Yes, this is Shepard's first Red Ball case. And
for Bradley's benefit, since he wasn't watching from the beginning, the Red Ball cases are basically the ones where they determine if, for whatever reason, there's a lot of either media or political pressure on them to solve the case. So they involve just about everybody in the department on solving it, or with the primary detective, the one who took the call, taking charge and telling everybody else what to do.
All right, good to know. Thanks.
Yeah, I've got a little point here. I bet Jeff wasn't happy about Renee being in it a lot.
Well, I mean, that in itself, I could still enjoy the episode if that was my only issue with it, but it's not. So anyway, go ahead.
Right then. Well, I have to write down here Jeff's issues. With it, not in general. Right.
That would take way too long to go through all my issues.
Oh, yeah, so I put here, good confrontation between Shepard and G. And, G bringing up the fact that he was did he say he was the first, among the first black detectives in an all-white department?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then so he said, he paved the way so that a black woman could be in this department, because he was angry at her for showing disrespect like, because I think she intimated that he didn't have the balls to fire her or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, when watching this today, Morgan's comment at the end of that scene was, "Gee, telling it how it is. Close the case." We guessed that probably over the course of the series, the 3 words that G has said the most is "close the case."
Yeah. Yeah, we'll might mention that in the portrait of an Al Giardello portrait of an ESTJ video. We'll probably be doing that in about May. Oh yeah, there was a mildly humorous moment when we found out that Bayless's bisexual NF wannabe website.
Yeah.
Because it was some sort of combination of his sexuality and some like meditation stuff, I believe.
Which, unfortunately, that won't be the last we hear about that.
Yes,
Really?
I wonder if fan fiction has been brought into that aspect. Where I think it's called Slash, the gay fan fiction of things. I think they actually
It's funny because they used the word slash in this episode, but not to mean that. It was about violence.
Yep. Because actually, I think they actually, just a slight digression for half a minute, is they did it with Blake 7, where you had some gay slash fiction between. It was just like gay writers writing fan fiction about a relationship between Blake and Avon in Blake 7. It was just a minor thing. Oh yes, the bit right at the end, I've written a good look on Munch's face at the end when he's playing the computer game, and the opening monologue from him. And then when I've written here, that's why I mentioned that to Jeff, but I sort of teased him about it because he was annoyed about being teased. And I just wondered, is that more of an ENTP trait where they're likely to just like do a monologue and just keep on, even though there's loads of people around them, it's like they want to do their monologue and make their point, whereas maybe the ENFP can see the effect that they're having on people and adjust. Do you think that's the case, Jeff, or not?
I don't know if one is better than the other at seeing effects on people. I don't know.
Because we brought that up yesterday.
I mean, the comment I made at the end of that was like, "Oh no, Munch becomes a video game addict," or whatever. But it's like, in a sense, there may be a generational thing there, because, you know, a lot of times we talk about NTs being into like the latest technology, and Munch almost kind of sounds, at the beginning of the episode, almost like kind of a technophobe, or he's like warning against technology. So it kind of seems against type. But then if you think about it, you know, there could be a little bit of just his age, where it's like he has kind of a feeling of there's superior ways of thinking, or things that have been damaged in some ways by, you know, the technology. And he looks at that video game as not being a good example of it. Like, he could probably come up with things he would think were better uses for it, whereas he's looking at that as in this is this mind-numbing thing that doesn't give you any knowledge, kind of thing. You know?
Yeah. Also, he'd probably also keep quiet. Probably also like he's the sort of person who would like play it in private and still complain about it, because like the intellectual part of him
maybe so.
Because you've got like, because like if it's an Enneagram Type 7, you'll be like, and an NT, be like, his intellectual part of him will know it's not right to just like spend time doing this. Like, but then the part of him that wants to have a load of fun. So there's like a battle in there between, because a lot of the NTPs are also Enneagram Type 7. So you've got that battle between the NT wants to improve themselves and the 7 that wants to have fun.
Are you speaking from experience, Mr. NT7?
Possibly.
Yeah. Well, we've already seen in the series, you know, some episodes that touched on Munch's problems with women over the years and some of his relationships. So we've definitely already seen that sort of conflict before, where he's the times he's led by his libido or whatever, he sometimes neglects some of those more intellectual evaluations.
Yeah, so he could be a sexual 7 as well, just like Jeff and I. Well, and me. Right, so apparently this episode was tied in with an attempt at a web series, or could you tell us about the actual video, how they tried to tie it in with the actual Homicide website, Jeff?
Well, I don't know a whole lot about it because at the time I wasn't even really aware of it, but I can read the brief thing that's on Wikipedia about it. It was called Homicide Second Shift, and it just says it was an internet web series presented in a static script comic book format. There was no streaming video that tied into the TV series. The web show started on February 21st of 1997, and it featured detectives of the Homicide Squad that worked the second shift after the television detectives went home for the day. Several of the characters from Homicide Second Shift had cameos on the actual Homicide TV show, and the show had one story crossover, and that's the one they're talking about, was the Homicide.com. So the two detectives, Bonaventura and Austin, were featured on the Homicide Second Shift thing, so they were crossovers from that, even though they previously appeared in one actual Homicide episode too before this. Anyway, there's really not much else it says about that. It says the television episode was self-contained. Parts 1 and 3, which were online only, provided expanded context for the story. So,
is the I know this might be a ridiculous question, but is the website still around? Because sometimes these things hang around.
Somebody did an archive of it, and I forgot. I didn't look that up, so I don't remember where it is. But one of the Homicide fan sites that's obviously done by a perceiver of some kind, and maybe an NFP, because it's very haphazard and scattered. It's not in any kind of order, but it talks about a lot of different episodes. And somewhere in the midst of all that, there's a page that has the archived, at least the front page of what it looked like. So it's out there somewhere.
Because if it could be out there, we could maybe review it.
Yeah. Sorry. I guess go ahead if you had more notes on this.
Oh yeah, I think that's it, pretty much. So, what do you want to say your thing about what your issues with it, Jeff, or do you want to let Bradley have his say?
I'll let Bradley go first because I want to get his fresher perspective before I start saying anything.
Right.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, admittedly, I didn't see the whole episode at normal speed. I saw maybe half of the 30 minutes of it. I saw it at normal speed, and the rest of it I just watched sped up. But based on the initial, I watched the whole initial 25 minutes at regular speed, and based on the initial investigation side of the story, I was very confused. So confused would be I think the best word I could say with what they were trying to do. It felt like they were trying something new in terms of episode format, or just the what I'm trying to say, the involvement of technology and trying to incorporate the internet sort of into the show organically. And I'm not sure how well they did that. I will say it's I know some police shows are always trying to, at least to me, police shows are always trying to inform the audience. They have some episodes have one or two facts that actual real facts, like Gotti saying that people could easily access what cases and the lives of police officers that basically the local police officers, they could very easily look them up, and Stipes was like, they don't need my permission. And the guy was like, no, and probably what he said, like 700 million back then for people.
Oh, well, he said 150 million, and he said if it's on the public record, people can get to it.
Oh, sure, yeah. But yeah, that's very good to clarify. I don't know why I got 700.
Yeah, he said 150 million around the world.
Okay.
I think that was for maybe terminals. I think he was talking about the BBS, though.
Yeah, he was talking about terminals. No, not necessarily people. Yeah, talking about terminals. Okay, but that's very interesting because I mean, granted, it's pretty 20 years ago the episode was aired, but that's probably very true of the time. Was that the internet was getting popular, and public access records were being put online. So it's always interesting to how they weave reality with fantasy, sort of. So because the show is essentially not real, but they do a very good job of making it seem real and incorporating actual real life, realistic fiction, but also non-fiction as well. So I was pretty impressed by the way they did that. But in terms of the whole technology feel to the episode, I mean, they said that Bayless had a website and sort of got a kick out of that. But the whole drama of get him before he kills again was it disturbed me, but I'm not sure why. It just felt a little bit off to me. And it felt like they were trying something new, and because they weren't used to doing it, it didn't come off. Because the show's very, very good at being organic, and this sort of episode struck me as sort of inorganic, and it didn't. There was a disconnect between like the authenticity of the previous episodes and this one sort of stuck out.
Before you go on, I just want to say I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah. You did. I mean, you said one thing about the episode, and it was like it involved the internet, and I was like, okay. So I sort of had my own preconceptions of what the episode was going to be like, and then I saw the actual episode, and I was like, okay, I kind of see what he means. Like within the first 10 minutes or so, I was like, yeah, I'm not sure. But the acting was good as always. So I thought it was very good the way Shepard, basically got double slapped, first by Bayless and then by G. And I thought that was very good of everyone.
Metaphorically, folks.
Metaphorically, there was no actual physical slap. Saving Lewis, who brought up the gunshot again and played it off as a joke again, which at this point, maybe the first time it was like, what did he mean? Maybe he was joking, but this time it was a little less jokingly, I think.
Yeah, I think initially, obviously he did it as a joke, but then when he was questioned on it, it's sort of like, that's still, because, because he did bring it up as like, hey, if that had been an inch lower, that could have gone into my cranium. So it's hard to know how much he actually cares about it, because it depends on how the actor plays it, and whether it becomes up again and again and again. We just don't know. So I'm
leaning now towards the more he brings it up, and the way he brings it up is definitely. And he won't do it. I don't think he's ever done it directly in her face. It's always been like subtly behind her back, and that's what kind of makes me think. He's being so indirect.
Yeah, but he did it within here. In my opinion, he did it so it was loud enough that she could hear.
Exactly, but same with the hat. He just turned his back and just left it there and kind of let the image sink in her mind with the same thing. It's that he wants her to know about it, but he doesn't actually want to confront her about it. And that sort of the way he's handling it is, when it's that indirect, it's hard to.
Pretty blatant to me.
Yeah, but it's blatantly non-direct is the thing.
Yeah, but that's just the way I'm wired. Like, I'm oversensitive to these things. It's like where it's like anybody else would look at it, or like say non-INFPs, non-INTPs, or they're just having their fun. Whereas I feel the niggle more than what it actually probably is.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Shepard is very on the nose, straight to the point, sort of no nonsense, and Lewis is not that. So it could be like a personality difference, but I'm gonna make this point before before we get back to this. So when I was talking about people, when I said save Lewis, everyone else was like, I'm not sure. When Shepard was coming up to people about, what are people thinking about me? What can they think, I'm weak, ineffective, that I hesitated and it's because I was a woman.
Yeah.
And then, but no one ever said that. Even Lewis, might brought up his, near death, but he never once brought up gender or.
Oh, he did. He did,
really?
but he didn't do it to her. He did it in a room where he got angry and then he stormed out and he said, "What is she, 170 pounds or something? How is she meant to stop this guy?" That was in the hospital, I think. But I'm not sure you saw that episode.
No, I didn't see it. Fair enough. Okay.
I personally think that Lewis has mixed feelings about this. And like I said, where he's thinking that it's not her fault because she's a woman, and he's slightly, like I said, he's got mixed feelings about it because he almost got killed.
Yeah, but he's handling it indelicately,
yes.
should I say? He's handling it indelicately. But back to G and Bayless. It was really good just to say enough of this. Do your job already. When she's been asking people and they've said there's no issue here, and now she's eventually finally put in the hot seat, and Gene mentioned to Bayless that he wants. I'm not sure who the person is. Is it some sort of higher up in the police department? Was it the police commissioner, or I'm not sure who the person was.
Bonfather. That's Bonfather.
Barfather's a colonel, so he's actually G's boss's boss.
Oh, okay. So yeah, basically G's boss. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. What was I saying? Yeah. So G went to Bayless about the Unfather wanting him to swap case lead, and the first thing Bayless did was go to her and confront her about it and be like, people, the higher ups want me to swap with you, and he's saying, I don't want that. Why don't you just close the case and do your job, and don't be inhibited by your own fears. That's your own fears and no one else's. And it's nice to be confronted about that, especially for Shepard, who does well with being confronted with. He's just that kind of person. So Bayless was able to do that, and so was G later on. Saying enough with your disrespect. Like you need to stop it off. You need to do your job. Basically, that's more or less what he said, right? Yeah. And not in that exact words, but he was very brief about it. And yeah, he just was basically no nonsense, exactly what she needed, I think. And yeah, so it was good to finally have people do that to her, I guess, or talk to her about it in a way she so plainly needed from the beginning. So it was nice to have that sort of resolved on that level. I'm sure the Lewis and Shepard will play out eventually later on in the season. But yeah, I really liked that about the episode. And I also liked there wasn't much of Falzone and Ballard, but there was a scene in the beginning when they were talking, and G just casually broke it up. It was like, I know my two great detectives went. And it's rare that I get to see him be that humorous, because he's normally just the hard person who's just there to tell people to do their jobs. But in that situation, he was just kind of like jokingly saying, I know that you're not doing what I think you're doing, and yeah, it's nice to see him be more casual. And I haven't seen much him being casual, so that's cool to see. And I think that's basically it from me.
Right then. Bradley. You used a very NF word earlier on. You used the word organic. What do you mean by organic?
Yeah, I guess I mean authentic, or I think authentic is the closest word to where the show had a very it comes off. They don't try to put too much spin on things. I think it's just directed, acted, written in such a way to where it could very easily be sold as a non-drama.
Would you say,
compared to other shows?
Would you say that if a plot was inorganic, that it would be contrived, and that organic is something that's like the events naturally unfold and don't seem contrived? Would that be it?
I'm not sure I'm actually referring to the actual events themselves, but just the events that are being basically the story of the show strikes me as very down to earth and not like sort of fanciful. And even though it's fiction, it's portrayed as more realistic than some other shows. And when they did this sort of internet murder thing, it was so out of the normal story of the show, or the plots of the show. It's so sort of so removed from that. It kind of made me sort of pay attention to how much it didn't make sense. So it sort of ruined my immersion a little. I mean, it was entertaining still, but it was just a little off in that they were trying something new, and you could tell they were trying something new. And you're like fully aware that it was new. So that sort of ruined it.
I mean, it seems that the actual killer had a better setup than the actual homicide website, because it's like he had a live stream where it changed apparently like maybe 1 frame a second, and then apparently the actual website, as Jeff said, was like a cartoon. So was that one of the unbelievable things, Jeff? Like, was it too advanced for the time?
It would have been a pretty small audience that would have had the ability to probably watch the whole thing without a lot of buffering. But I did like the aspect of that. While they were trying to trace the thing, then the server crashed because too many people were trying to watch it. And then the way, I think I understand everything Bradley's saying, and the way I would phrase it is that everything that we have typically complimented Homicide on for what separates it from other shows, what makes it better, it was not as good in this one. So it's like, this could have been Matlock or CSI or any number of other shows that didn't last very long either. It didn't have the things that make Homicide better than everything else, in my opinion, in terms of dramas. And it's kind of along the lines of what he was saying, is that it just, I agree with the feeling off. It still has some great performances in it, and that's why I maintain that I still don't think there's such thing as a bad episode of Homicide, because the fact that the actors took this mess of a script and were able to still perform it, take it seriously, do everything that they normally do in terms of trying to make this work, is a testament to everyone involved in the show's production, that they were still able to get what they got out of it, because the script is a mess. And that's there's really probably only like 2 episodes in the entire series that I really say that about, and this is one of them. But there's still some good scenes and some good things, little moments, like he mentioned, the exchanges between Ballard and Falzone. We still had a little bit of basically some of the things that were good in this were things that were probably added by the producers for continuity's sake rather than the original script. We had the continuing kind of tension between Lewis and Shepard about what happened with them. We had Falzone and Ballard's relationship being mentioned. We had Bayless and G's references to the Adina Watson case and what happened with that. And a Pimbleton reference. So we had these things that were kind of continuity drops along the way that sort of were the things that said this is Homicide and not some dumb show. But the script it feels like it was originally written for a dumb show. And with it's like, let's stick as many semi-realistic references to internet-related things in as possible and do it awkwardly. So yeah, I would agree with the non-organic thing and feeling off. It did feel like this was like a very awkward attempt to shoehorn some things into a show that just don't work very well. And so, I understand kind of what they were trying to do. And like I said, there's little bits along the way, like when we had the contrast of showing people using the technology. Morgan said, "It's the technology episode," and then we show G at the end using like the old-fashioned adding machine kind of thing. To contrast that, it's like he even made a comment earlier about like he didn't have much use for computers because G definitely is very old school. Even Munch sounded that way when he was talking about the game and stuff. So we have some conflict with that, but yeah, I mean, it just again, I could just rattle off a bunch of shows that I have no interest in or very little interest in that would have had a plot like this and have the stupid stuff like, Bayless's website and the awkward way they did the chat room stuff and the completely unrealistic way they did tracing internet stuff and subpoenas for identification. Like, there's no way they could have done what they did in this episode that fast. At that time, in 1999, it just flat out couldn't have happened. And there's very few times in Homicide where that's the case. There's some things that maybe stretch the imagination sometimes. Maybe you say, well, this is a little too pat in some cases, but not very often. And there's very few times where there's something you flat out say, this could not have happened. There's things where it's like, well, they probably would have been better if they didn't put this in. Like, what I said about the bounty hunter one where they immediately had somebody recognize the one bounty hunter and be threatening him in jail, when it was like, that was probably better as an understood thing rather than spelled out. But in this, we had just things that there was no capability of doing as fast as they did. But that being said, the only thing that produced any tension really in terms of was that kind of suspense of, getting to the killer before he can strike again kind of thing, which they've done more effectively before in episodes like the sniper episodes and things like that, where there was a definite time frame for when something was going to happen and they had to act on that. So that element in itself can be useful. But again, because this episode was such a mess in terms of the way it was written, like the pacing was still off even with that. So it just felt very haphazard, very slapdash, stick a bunch of references into things and characters just sort of serving the plot in some ways, which we've talked about how Homicide doesn't do that. Well, this was probably the closest example to them doing that in the whole show. Like I said, there are definitely some elements and some individual scenes I enjoyed because the performances are still good. Even Shepard, she's not a bad actress. She does her part well. It's just that character seems out of place most of the time. In this episode, ironically, seems less out of place because the whole episode seems out of place. So, in and of itself, her part is not more out of place than anybody else's. And the kind of sort of, the relationship between her and G, him bringing up, her being a black woman and Bayless bringing up sort of the idea of being the new to the squad and what happened with him, like all those things, those elements are good sources of material. But again, even those scenes, it still felt like there was something off, but it wasn't the actors, it was the writing. It was like they just didn't have good enough dialogue, good enough, interactions that they did the best they could with it. But it's so obvious that this is not the usual standards of homicide.
You mentioned there a generation thing. You've got Bayliss, an ISFJ, and thus an SJ. He's got a website, and Munch, not got a website. He's an NT, but he's a different generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I think that's the kind of thing that, even though Morgan said this episode like dates itself more than any other, but I think it's relevant even in today's world, because there is a definite sort of divide when it comes to things like social media and stuff like that, in terms of the way it's used. And there could be like teenagers that are Guardian types that are much more clued into the way the internet is used now versus older NTs that simply they're just not a part of that world. So there's more of a divide now, where you can be like somebody who spends a ton of time on the internet but have no connection whatsoever to a bunch of other people who do too. There's so many different uses and so many like corners of it that don't interact with each other at all. Whereas it used to be like being on the internet at all, that was sort of a clique in itself, in a way. Like it was originally, it was probably for the first decade or so, probably like 90% plus of using the internet was NTs, probably because they were the only ones who knew about it. It was like this underground network.
And then you, because of your dad and older brother.
Yeah, that's probably the only reason I knew anything about it until late in the 90s. Because the fact that it was earlier, even back into the 80s, I knew about BBSs because of my father and my brother. So, the NTs were like the ones in touch with that, and everybody else slowly dragged to that. But then once Guardians become in something, like basically it becomes like everything else that Guardians use, where once it's an accepted thing, then it's like they're the standard and everybody else is the minority that's kind of, in a different world. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing that's still true today, even many years after this. But this is the kind of thing I know that, if this was the first episode of Homicide that I showed to my older brother, for instance, if he hadn't seen it before and I showed him that, like this would have been the kind of thing he would have mocked mercilessly. It's kind of like, I can't remember the name of the show, but there was something much more recently where they did a show where it was supposed to be they got these geniuses together to help them solve crimes or something. And in the first episode, there were so many like unrealistic, unscientific things in it that it was just so brutalized by people who actually knew about technology and how things work, and how people knew how law enforcement worked. And I can't remember the name of it. I wish I did, but it was like when you purport to be demonstrating or showing something where you're trying to highlight something, you got to know what you're talking about, or else you just come off looking buffoonish.
Yeah, it's always going to be a problem as a writer if you're going to write a genius, because then that means they've got to say some pretty smart things, and they better be right, or you'll look silly as a writer.
Yeah. So it's so that's the thing, is I can respect someone trying to do it. It's a challenge. And so I respect someone trying to challenge themselves as a writer or producers, or, I know that there's a lot of, I don't know what to call it, not anti-artistry, but just there's a lot of sort of, in television and movies, whatever, there's always a certain element, and it's not just Guardians, though I'm sure they're a part of it, in the industry that are, they always want to do everything the way it's been done. They don't want to try anything new. They don't want to do anything outside of a certain bubble, because they're like, well, this is the tried and true thing that works, so this is what we want to do. And they're always trying to pull it back in that direction.
Or copy the latest hit.
They want to do something new and challenging, and so there's always that push against each other. So I respect someone trying to do something that is outside of the comfort zone. And I think a lot of the time, Homicide did that. When they first came on the air, it was very jarring, the different way that they did a cop show compared to what had been the typical thing. And even, because they debuted in the same year NYPD Blue did, that was an example of somewhere NYPD Blue, which actually overall I think is a good show, but it was marketed completely differently, because NYPD Blue was trying to kind of push the shock value, whereas Homicide went exactly the opposite direction, was trying to kind of get across the the message that police work is not really very glamorous or exciting. And you're trying to do that while getting people to watch a drama show. So it's not easy to do. So there was a lot of challenging in the writing, and a lot of, over the several seasons before this, there was a lot of examples of Homicide approaching something in a way that hadn't been done before. So all of that is really good. So and again, what I can't really describe but anything but irony, something like this, which for a lot of shows would be that trying something new kind of thing, Homicide comes off seeming more normal and like every other show by trying to do this.
But to me, it's like the NTs actually watching it who were using a computer. They were like, this should have been done 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is that when it comes to technology, you do something and you're immediately out of date.
Yeah.
Because it moves so fast sometimes. And that's the trouble with something like this, is they have gone away with it before because there's certain, was some discussion on internet things briefly, but they,
Oh, Jeff, you're cutting out a lot.
they really highlight it. Oh, that's all I can say. So I don't know what came through.
Yeah, I was also thinking there about, I was saying they could have done this 10 years before in 1989. Even in the early 80s, they had Tron, which was about virtual reality. That was like made by Disney. That was like 1983. Mm-hmm. And then they had I think War Games was definitely 1983. That was about a hacker. So these things have been done before. And I think maybe they could have done it 5 years before when Windows 94 came out. But I don't really know about like the streaming thing. I mean, if they'd have done it super for real, it would have been like, let's download this thing and it takes an hour to download and then they can watch the video. And then
they had the dial-up sound. You could hear it's obviously it was obviously a dial-up internet, which is expected because, that's what most people had at that time. And we've already gone over how the police department wasn't exactly top technology.
Yeah, it was the first few seasons. It was like they're all typing their reports on typewriters.
Yeah. So that's the thing is that it like I said, with technology, it's like you're out on the things that it could like lose the authenticity of what you're doing. And in this episode, they focus way too much on things that are easy to just sort of focus on and take you out of the story.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the internet really got big was when Windows 95 came out. And they came out with an interface that was very easy to use with the taskbar at the bottom. And basically, it's not changed much since then. And in fact, with Windows, they had a couple of misfires with Vista and 8, but they've sort of gone back. It's very similar to Windows 95. And they basically nailed it with that, where you got a start menu, then you got a taskbar, and you got a notification area. That enabled people to use the computer, and just that big release, Windows 95. So they could have done this in about 95, but again, the internet speed wouldn't have been there for it. Maybe it would have been a bit more, but as Jeff said, the main problem from a realism point of view is getting the subpoena quickly enough. Unless it was a terrorist-related case and they could go to a court really quickly, I don't know if that would have been possible. Maybe if it was after 9/11 and what they could have done as a plot is they could have got the subpoena very quickly by actually using the 9/11 laws and sort of like for something that they shouldn't have been used for. You know what I mean? In order to get it quick. And then there could have been a storyline about them using those laws for something that wasn't intended. And Munch would have, let's say if it had carried on to about 2002 or after 9/11, then Munch would have said, hey, the Patriot Act wasn't meant for that. It was meant to stop terrorists, but we're using the Patriot Act to get this subpoena really quickly. So that could have been an issue. I don't know if that's been brought up in other shows that you've seen, Jeff, after 9/11.
Not much, because I've watched a lot less television in those. I mean, of current television in the years since then. But yeah, not much in shows I watch. But I'm sure it has in some, probably.
Yeah, because I imagine a character like Munch, who, although an ENTP, is quite idealistic about big governments and having too much power, and he's sort of like caught in the middle of that as a detective. He would like that quick access, but also he doesn't want proper procedures being circumvented. So maybe that may have come up when he's in other, or maybe that's come up in Law and Order, because they've made episodes of Law and Order after 2002, haven't they?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I realised 9/11 was 2001, but you know what I mean, like after 9/11 2001. And whenever they brought the Patriot Act in, because they did a similar thing in the UK where it was like these laws were meant to be for fighting terrorism, but then the police used the new powers for things that don't have to do with fighting terrorism. And they could easily say something like, in this kind of situation where, hey, we're up against the clock, we need the subpoena quickly. Right. I will give it 7 out of 10. What will you give it, Bradley?
That's a good question. I think I give it 6 out of 10.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think I've given an episode that low of a score, but yeah, it was the stuff that wasn't really related to the main investigation was interesting, but in the actual investigation, I didn't find interesting at all.
But to me, the actual main investigation was the effect of the investigation on Shepard and her relations with Bayliss and with G. That's what was interesting to me. Plus, I was also tickled by the way they were, by the change in technology as well, that appealed to me, and the way they dealt with it. So it had a good pace on it.
Yeah, but that's all you can say. That's mostly true for any Homicide episode, though.
Yeah, but I don't really like the episodes which are like, say, Doll's Eyes, or I don't think I get, but other ones that are particularly depressing and gruesome.
Oh yeah, so you're one of those people.
One of those, a sensitive soul, like Jeff.
Yeah, actually, I don't really mind this as long as it's well done. So you don't really mind that as long as it's well done. Okay, Mr. Yeah.
F. What do you think?
Yeah. Jeff?
Yeah.
Oh, what do you think of the episode? I mean, what do you rate the episode? Yeah.
Well, Ben does this thing sometimes where he says, like, I give this one score and this another one, and then come up with. So I can say on this, I would give the script a 1, and the performances a 9. So that makes an average of 5. So I give it a 5 out of 10.
Wow.
Which, for anyone who's been paying attention, is the lowest score I've given to a Homicide episode. And in fact, there's only been 2 previous episodes that I gave a 6. So that tells you how rare it is. Every other one that we've done so far, I've given at least a 7. So this is the lowest rating so far. And unfortunately, I don't want to bias Bradley too much, but a few episodes down the road, I won't say which one, there's one that might be about the same. So we'll see what I feel like when I watch it again. But I will say that the writer of this one, or the co-writer, Sarah Charno, had one previous credit, was the Red Wine episode from earlier this season, and that was much better. So I know she's capable, obviously, of writing a better script than this one. But yeah, the script is a mess, but the performances show, again, how good Homicide is, that they're able to make as much that they did out of it.
Jeff,
so, yeah.
1 out of 10. Is that lower than any Blake 7 episode?
Script-wise?
Yeah.
I can't remember. I actually think I think there was one episode of Blake 7 I gave a 1 overall. I'm pretty sure, but I could be wrong. I have to go back and look. But I think, if I remember right, the second to last episode of the whole show, I think I gave it a 1.
Wow.
Because that was really bad.
Oh yes, that one. Yeah, I think
that was some like grade school acting on top of the story being terrible.
Yeah, the acting was bad.
That was like a parody of everything. Yeah, this was not nearly that bad because, like I said, the acting performances are good. The one thing I would say though is, like I said this earlier, that everything we normally compliment Homicide for is slightly off, and that includes the casting of the guest characters. Because I think the regulars are just as good as always in this episode, but I didn't think any of the guest characters were particularly strong, and then they're, a little bit off as well. Not bad, but just like not strong. I'll just put it that way.
Would you say that? So, did this get a lower score than Kinder?
No,
because I thought you gave Kinder 3 out of 10.
Well, I gave it a 2.
Oh, so so in script wise, is it lower than Kinder?
Well, yeah, I didn't rate everything I've ever seen separately on script versus acting, Ben. I'm just.
Yeah, but generally, I'm asking you now. Do you think this script is worse than the Kinder script?
No. No, because at least this one made sense, like in the English language, whereas Kinder is just like some kind of drug trip.
I think we could have a good hangout where we went through Kinder, like Ben versus Jeff, on why Kinder is so crap versus why it's so cool. The SN divide.
That sounds like torture. Like if we were going to do that, we already did do it. I would say we did it with Homicide in the Subway. That was the one we had the biggest discrepancy on, and we already talked about that one. But actually, you did the same thing with. It was more recently. Oh, yeah, the first part of the Kellerman PI story.
Oh yeah. That was the topic. That was big. Yeah. That's gruesome for me. Ooh,
but yeah, I don't do that. Like even if something bothers me, like is disturbing to me, that doesn't actually make me like rate it really low. Now it can lower my rating a little bit because if I physically can't watch something, then it's hard for me to have any enjoyment of it. So that does lower my enjoyment, but it doesn't like it. It's not going to take something from like an 8 to a 2 or something because it's like that in itself can't be what I find fault with, unless it's the entire episode of something. If I physically just can't watch any of it, then obviously, I can't, rate that with any. But just a bad feeling about something is not going to make me give it a really low score because there's a lot of leeway there for I can enjoy the performances of something even if there was something in it that bothered me, story-wise or just emotionally. I think before I brought up there's a particular episode of Chicago Hope that I saw that I really, really hated the feeling I got from it. But I still respected the hell out of the people involved because they did such a good job performing it. So I can definitely separate those things. But I haven't gone through and given every script a rating separately from the episodes of things. So I can't really provide that. But in terms of overall enjoyment, I gave Kenda a 2. This got a 5. So it was obviously more enjoyable. And there's quite a few Doctor Who stories I gave a 5. So that's why I sort of have a comparison thing where the way I look at it, 5 is really halfway between bad and good. So it's like it's the worst something can be and still not be bad. It's like literally right there at the cusp of this is still good television, but just barely.
But technically, though, if you've got 5 on the bad side and 5 on the good side, then the 5 should be part of the bad.
Well, yeah, I don't see it that way.
Okay, that's fair enough.
5's the middle.
Yeah.
4 and under is bad because I go all the way down to 0 if I have absolutely no enjoyment of something whatsoever. So 0 to 4 is bad. 5 is not bad or good. It's kind of in the middle, and then 6 through 10 would be good or better in my way of rating. So to recap for the end of this video, for when I'm going back to listen to them later. Ben said 7, Bradley said 6, I said 5. And join us next time for a much better episode entitled A Case of Do or Die.
Right then, bye bye, folks.
Bye.
Hmm.